Thank you. You're so nice. And yes, I have begun the recording. So welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, in case you are not familiar with Zoom, I want to call your attention to what you have at the bottom of your screen, and you will notice that you have Q and A. On mine it's Q and R. And you also have chat, converser, which is the way you can communicate with us, because microphones for the participants are cut off. So don't hesitate. Once Edmée gets started, that's my job, is to watch any questions you may have. So we're here today with Edmée Schalkx, who was born in Venezuela, of Dutch parents, has lived in 10 countries, and today works with 32. She's going to talk to us on the subject of what kind of leaders are third culture kids. To start, I'm going to launch a little poll, a little questionnaire. So let me do that right now. There's 2 questions, and if you answer as far as I know, we get the results automatically. And Edmée, do you see the box? Is it open for you?
Yes, I do see the box. So you have the first question and the second question, yeah. I can also see I cannot vote.
We don't count.
Do you see if people are answering, Linda?
Yes, I do. I have 32% so far living today in the same place they were born, but 68% no. And we have so far 100% work with multicultural people.
Great. That makes life beautiful.
Yeah. And Monica tells us, as a TCK, this is confusing, because in between, hang on, let me get it up, in between place of birth and living here in the Netherlands again, that is also a third culture experience. And I think we understand, Monica.
Yeah. I think the hardest I think the hardest is when a TCK or an individual born and raised in different places and then goes back to the place where they started off. And I think that makes it very, very hard. Probably the harder than you hop, at least that's my experience, rather than hopping all over. It's harder when you decide or have to come back to the place you started or where your parents started. Rika says that she's lived in many countries between her birth and returning, and now she feels like home, except one special place. That's right, and I think that's one of the things we'll be talking today, is how we feel. I feel that, yeah, Linda is typing very happily. But I feel that most of the people here are TCKs or have been expats, and I think a lot of the things we'll be talking today will sound like very familiar to you. Like Linda said, I want to invite you to feel, just to ask the questions anytime you feel. I might answer them at that point, or I might go back. But Linda is going to make sure that if the question is very important at that point, that she will let me know so that I stop and answer the question or start a conversation if that's needed. But please, this is an interactive, I like working interactively. I just switch off the chat now so that I don't get too lost in the attention, so Linda will help me whenever needed. First, I want to welcome all your Globetrotters. At least that's how I tell people I am. Like Linda said, I was born in Caracas, Venezuela. My parents lived there, I think, about 47, 48 years. Both of them are Dutch. The problem is my mother was born in Indonesia. And after the Second World War, they repatriated back to the Netherlands. So she herself was a kind of TCK. I did my studies in anthropology. First, I did cultural anthropology, and then I did applied anthropology in a kind of MPhil at the London School of Economics. I lived in about 15 different countries, and I've worked in probably about 30 other ones in periods of 2 to 6, 7 months. So I've been jumping all around. And I think apart from traveling, one of the biggest presents I've received from life is the knowledge of languages I have. I mean, they might not be good, they might not be perfect, but I can talk and manage a lot of different languages like Italian and Spanish, some French, some Russian. So there I have a present, and I think that for us living and being born in different countries and traveling around, that's probably the biggest present, because communication is among people is really, really important, especially when you are dealing with a lot of culture. I'm also a professional coach, trainer, and a speaker. And okay. I just want to show very shortly what I do, because it is part of who I am, and it's a lot of the work I do. I really work with entrepreneurs, coaches, and managers who live in a diverse or work in a diverse setting, and are looking for ways to become or improve their leadership or have a better cultural competence, with the aim to interact more seamlessly with others and create connections that work. And the reason why I am doing this is because I could have used myself as an expert many times. Often I felt lost. I didn't understand what was going on, because for me, living among cultures was just a normal thing to do. So I want to tell you just very short who I am, not so much to tell you my sad story, but to bring ourselves into that situation of who we are. As I saw in the chat, a lot of us are multicultural backgrounds, and so that's the only reason. But I'm wondering how many of you will resound, that my story will resound with you. I just want to tell you, when I would wake up in the mornings just before going to school, my mother would wake me talking Dutch. We'll have a Dutch breakfast with, the Dutch people know the chocolade hagelslag, this chocolate on the bread. Nobody else eats that, but we Dutch. And then I would get on the school bus and I would be speaking Spanish, learning the Venezuelan history, the geography. I would be doing everything in Spanish. And then by 2, I would come back home and I would step, without even thinking, into the Dutch world. I would start speaking Dutch. I would start behaving like a Dutch. I would have the norms and values, be on time, work hard, all the things that parents tell you. And during the weekends, I would spend most of my time with the kids of my parents' friends, which usually were Italian, German, French, Belgium, Americans, British, and the kids by themselves would have this kind of Spanglish language, while the parents were all speaking in English. So you would in that small environment already see the difference, but it was very, very normal. When I moved to England to study in Cambridge, I went to live at a British family, and it was for the first 5 days only immersed in this English family life. And then suddenly I went to the school. I had to learn English, so in my O level, so I was really studying in English. But at 3 o'clock, my life would turn into the Spanish life. My friends, just by osmosis, were Spanish, Venezuelans, and a lot of Mexicans. And then in the weekends, my best friends were all British, but they were all British who had been born or in Argentina, or in Kuala Lumpur, or in Canada, and we would wander with such an ease and talk in the language we were dealing at that moment without really thinking about it. When I graduated, I started working for the United Nations with a Dutch contract. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs gave me to United Nations, and they sent me to Honduras, which was my very first job, real job. And there I had the same life. During the day I was speaking Spanish, working with the Hondurans, the ladies, and all the entrepreneurs. And then in the evening I would go into the expat life, and it was usually English or sometimes Dutch speaking. And then the next day I would start all over the same. And that I did in all the countries I lived, in Italy, in Armenia, in Costa Rica, in Japan, not Japan, doesn't matter. So I did a lot of life without knowing, jumping, going from one country to another one, and really not knowing. Traveling was just my blood. It was what kept me learning and sharing, and I learned a kind of problem solving, very practical. I was hired in a lot of projects to work with little, because when I was living in Venezuela, that we had no electricity often, we had no water, sometimes spare parts didn't come. So we were brought up with solving problems with very little and as practical as possible. So that was one of my strengths. Also, and I'm sure most of you will recognize that when you are an expat or when you are an immigrant or a migrant or a TCK in many of our cases, we live in the local countries. We are immersed, but we still have a different status than the rest of the people. That makes us unique, that makes us look at life in a different way, especially when we have jumped from one country to another one. You start looking at situations very differently. And networking, that becomes part of who we are. I mean, since we are little like this, you see your parents going to the diplomatic parties or to the business parties, and you start already going to the American school or the German school or whatever school it is, and you start already gathering people from all over the world. And after a year or two, you want to keep contact with them, so you keep that network alive. I don't know how many of you are aware of that. And it is probably, after my languages, one of my most worthy possessions, my global network. When I finally came to the Netherlands, because I had finished my 7-year contract and I had to repatriate, I realized that it was hard. Coming to the Netherlands was the hardest thing I think I ever did. Because even though I had family, I had some friends, or at least the parents of the children of my parents' friends, I was just not fitting. I spoke very funny Dutch. Even though I looked Dutch, I had blue eyes, I had more Dutch surname than mine, you will not find. So people were really trying to put me in that Dutch box. And the harder they put me in the box, the harder I fought to get out. And I was really not happy. I really didn't like living in the Netherlands. I wanted to find a job and move as fast as you could put me on that train or plane or car, whatever it was. I was ready to even move on a mule if it would be possible. But, well, I got married, I had a child, and then I decided that Holland wasn't such a bad place. And that's when I changed my profession. I became a professional coach. And then I had Barbara, which is a lovely client of mine, told me, I think you have the biggest cultural shock I've ever seen in my life. And I was already living, I think, 18 years in the Netherlands when somebody told me that. I was like, how is that possible? And that's when I really had to stand still and find out why I had not adapted. Why was change a problem when it was never a problem? It was always easy. And that's when I started reading books and I started trying to understand a little bit better. My parents had moved to the Netherlands, so we were able to discuss our love-hate relationship with Holland and the big missing we had with Venezuela. And that's when I really took the step to acceptance. And that's when I discovered that I was not a normal person in between brackets, because we are very normal. But that's when I realized my mother was a TCK and I was a TCK myself. And that really, really changed my way of looking at Holland and my way of finding finally a way to say, okay, this is how it is, and let me get the best out of it. I don't know if any of you have a similar, I mean, if it sounds like a familiar story to you, or it's total frame. I see that some of you are saying, what language do I dream in my sleep? When I dream or speak about things that have to do with the house, like with the dogs or food, I speak Dutch. When I need to count, when I'm learning mathematics or making an account, it's Spanish. And when I do business work, is mainly English. That's and I dance Latin American music, and yeah, those are the three. I would consider those my three mother, father, adoptive languages.
And you can see, Edmée, that we have Rika and Joyce who are saying how much they identify with it. And I have Anna Matrenga who said, yes, she identifies very much with this too. So that what you are saying is definitely resonating with our participants.
Yeah, well, I also say amazing. I only just discovered the TCK term and it was really affected my life, and I'm 41. I was 50 when I discovered that word, and I have to thank that to this lady, Ruth van Reken, who is an American with a Dutch background. And I was at a conference here in the Netherlands about, I don't know, 8 years ago or something like that. And I bought this book, Third Culture Kids Growing Among Worlds. Wow, you have no idea when I read the book and I said, okay, I'm not strange, I'm not sick, I'm not weird. It is happening. And it really helped me grow. It really gave me a place in life that I could name and I could experience. And she says that third culture kids, I'm still having a little bit problems with the kids because we are adults. So they have added to third culture kids an A at the end for adults. But third culture kids are usually kids that come who have lived in a country different than their parents, say from the age of 2 to the age of 18, more or less. That's the time where cultural development starts, where people are starting to create an identity, and that's the term they're using for that specific time, between 2 years old to about 18 years. After the 18th, after you have developed, it's usually expat or migrant or immigrant, depending on which term you fall. And why is this? That mainly has to do that when you are being grown up in that development time between 2 and 18, that's where you create not only your personality, but that's where people learn the language in a more natural, more ownership way. So they make it part of who they are. Like I told you, the way I manage my language is I learn schooling language, like counting and grammatics in Spanish. So I count automatically in Spanish. But because my parents always talked in Dutch, and food and the dogs and all that was in Dutch, those things come naturally to me. And English is the language I used to talk to other kids that that didn't belong to that nearer part, or afterwards when I went to study. So it makes who you are, that those 16, 18 years. Oh, excuse me. When we look at the TCKs, they have made some skills and experience that are unique to them. And I would like to know, if you could write on the chat, I need to open it myself. I would like to know, what do you think are those skills TCK leaders have? What do you think are the difference that a TCK leader has compared with a, say, local leader? It's not the right way of explaining it, but I'm trying to make a difference. I would like to, if you could 1 or 2 words write on the chat, what 1 or 2 skills you think are different. Enrique, yeah?
Well, I was just going to say, while people are writing, I have some different experiences here.
Yeah.
We have someone who's attended workshops with Ruth at the Women International Network and Families in Global Tradition Conference this year in her legacy as well. We have Suniva, who has told me that, hang on, I'm trying to find it, but who shared her experience. I think Suniva is the person who, excuse me, talks to her pets in different languages. And I thought that was pretty good. And we have someone who went to school in America, originally from Malaysia, and at the age of 19 had a lot of trouble adapting to coming back home. That's Christina.
Yeah.
And you have lots of messages that have just come up, Edmée.
Okay. Well, if we look very quickly at the couple of terms some of you have written, for example, cultural intelligence and interpersonal sensitivity, lateral thinking or thinking out of the box, open-minded, curiosity, resilience. Let me move down. I guess they are inclusive rather than divisive. The ability to perceive, understand, and manage different conflicts. So there are a lot of things that we learn when you are switching from one place to the other one, and it comes natural. It is so easy. It's fun for us who are in that world. The problem is we are not aware we're doing that. We are not aware the way we switch so easily. I remember my mother telling somebody that I would be in the kitchen talking to the lady who was helping cleaning the house, and I would be speaking to her in Spanish, and I would cross the threshold into the sitting room, and I would switch automatically into Dutch. And if we had a party with English-speaking people, I would just move into English. The problem with that is when you leave somebody behind, in this case, the lady helping us, and I was giving her instructions, I would switch and she would stay behind. And these are the things that we also, a lot of us do without really noticing. I see that there are new messages, 10 messages. Do we have to pay attention to those, or should I continue talking, Linda? I don't think Linda is talking to me.
Sorry, I'm here. Excuse me. I turned off my microphone to have less
background noise.
Yes, exactly. And are you talking about the question and answer, or?
Yeah, I see that there are about 6 questions, so I don't know if they are important to pay attention to them, or should
people giving their answer to your questions. I have people working on both.
Okay.
In both areas. So you have adaptability, and that third culture kids know what it's like to feel like a fish out of water, and that might be needed to integrate those fish out of water. Adaptive skills, to tailor your approach to individual personalities in a team. Avoid a generic management approach, and recognize that we're different. And Pascal Stum says, I'm unsure that third cultural kids' skills are specific to that group. So I guess she's talking about leaders.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. So when we look at the personality of TCKs, they are very adept, very natural for them to manage different people from diverse groups. There might be women and men, there might be different ages, there might be different religions, it doesn't matter. That's because they have been probably in schools or traveling around with mixing in such a way that has become part of who they are. But networking is also something they do very naturally. They know what the do's and don'ts are, even without not knowing that specific culture, but they have learned to observe and wait to see what we have to do in a networking situation so that we can create a better relationship. And that is something very natural of people who keep crossing from one culture to another one. It doesn't have to be only TCKs, but TCKs get it from very young, so they are not even aware. Well, an expat who moves when they are older in age, that learning, they have to go through the pains and the shame of doing funny, stupid things. But for TCKs, it's just very natural. Sorry. TCKs are also, I don't know what's happening. TCKs are also, it's part of who they are to translate situations. And here, people who have children, who their own children who speak one language at school and at home, if you observe to them, you can see how easy they are translating. I remember my daughter trying to tell me things that for me were normal, but that for her, because her friends didn't understand it, she just was translating the things I was doing, because people thought I was strange in this small town speaking Spanish, and she was able to excuse or to explain in a very simple way without even noticing she was explaining what I was doing. But I think a very big added value is that TCKs, because they have been going to school with different nationalities, they have been going to school with different religions, experiences, but also social differences. When you go to the schools, you have people who really come from a mission, but you also have kids who come from the diplomatic environment or from a business environment, or they are workers themselves. So they have learned in a very easy, natural way to not look at those differences. Those differences are not different, it's just a fact. So often racial issues are not issues. I'm not saying always, but we TCKs are able to jump over those situations by explaining it. So we might explain a situation not because one is green and the other one is blue and the other one is Catholic, but because we would probably explain, you know, it's a different life, it's a different experience, and we would explain things in a different way without having to refer to words like religion or race. They're black or they're American, so they're Chinese or they are whatever they are. So it makes the conversation often more neutral, less biased. Oh, I'm doing
And
something.
we have, sorry, Edmée, for interrupting.
Yes.
We have Patricia Stoke, who says that her doctoral research, she studied TCK, adult third culture kids, as potential global leaders with a global mindset. And she found that many TCKs have a global mindset, a cultural intelligence, and leadership capabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of the way of living, but also observing. TCKs are usually very good at observing, because the experience has showed us that if we move too fast, we might say something stupid that we might regret. So we have learned to observe before we do or say something. The problem when you are moving up and down and when you are jumping from culture to culture, especially when we are not aware, like often we are not at that point, TCKs feel detached because they don't belong. My daughter, for example, keeps saying, yeah, my father is Hungarian, but I have nothing to do with Hungary. But you are Venezuelan, but we are not able to go there anymore. So she herself is feeling that lack of understanding, like in this Ruby code, you know, all the pieces have to work together. And sometimes with TCKs, the pieces don't always fit. And that makes us feel strange. If you're a teenage, it definitely makes us feel weird. Some other teenagers will just feel the other way around, great, and use that. But detachment is often also because we move often and suddenly, and kids learn not to get attached too fast to things. I'm going to close the window. The dogs on the street are barking. So that detachment is part of the way to protect us. And we don't have deep roots. TCKs have a shallow roots in all these different cultures. They have been able to adapt to different places, but they don't have big roots. For example, I cannot say in the Netherlands, I don't know anybody at the moment that knows me except my family, that knows my life, how I lived in Venezuela when I was a child. So those stories I have nowhere to share with. Or nobody can tell me, you know, I remember when you were 3 or 4, whatever. That's part of the stories we don't have anymore, and that's part of our identity. And when we are moving from one place to other one, we struggle. We really struggle with defining what is my identity, who I am, what are the stories that come with my story, with who I am. And why do suddenly I feel this way or think that way? And if we're able to stand still and look at the situation we have been living in, at the cultures, the language, the experiences we have had, we'll be able to insert some of those experiences in our identity. But if you're not aware of it, like all those years I was in Holland and I was really feeling out of everywhere, and I was really fighting to understand who I am. That part is very important, and it's something TCK struggle over, because we become chameleons. We move from one place to the other one. We have learned so easily to adapt to the environment that often we forget who are we, what's the inner part of us. And when that happens, that's when your identity, that's when you you start fighting and trying to understand who you are and where do you fit and what's the place in that society, in that group you are at that moment.
Sorry,
I'm sure. Yes?
I have a question asking for advice. Would you like that now, or would you like to keep it to the end?
Yeah, you can ask the question, yeah.
Okay, so we have Nancy Bravo who says, my daughter grew up between two cultures, German and Mexican, and we're living in Germany now. What recommendation do you have to give her, for me to give her, about making her feel lucky and support her and boost her in her life?
Okay. I could answer that question, but Linda, let me leave that for the end, because I think it would help when I tell a little bit more. It will help her, and I would really give her extra tips. So could you park that question for me?
I will. I will leave it right here, and it will come up the next time I consult. Okay.
Great. Do you have another question?
No, we have Svetlana, who talks about research indicates strong sides of TCKs, global mindset leadership. And what about the drawbacks for leadership? Not fitting in, feeling uprooted, their identity issues.
Yeah.
And Rika says that since moving to Finland, I feel like people just ridicule me at work or otherwise. Like being culturally rich is a bad thing. Yeah,
if I would be coaching Rika, I would probably ask her, I would stop on that ridiculing, because is it about you feeling, giving new form to your identity, or is it really that they're making fun of you? And I think these are the issues I was saying with the identity, that often when we feel cornered, or when we feel bullied, or when we are not in our skins very comfortable, these are the moments that these kind of feelings come up. I was really ridiculed by my Dutch family, because I have, especially when I moved many years ago, I had a funny Dutch, no way about it. And they would be taunting me all the time, and every time I would say a sentence, they would improve it. And one day I got so upset that I said, you know what, the day you speak 2 languages the way I speak 4, then you can tell me I am wrong, you know? And of course that's not the way of solving it, but that's the way it comes out, because then suddenly what people are making you feel bad about it, it becomes your strength. Wow, I speak so many languages and you just speak 1. And that is that's one of the tips for the mother is talk with your children about this, because my parents didn't talk about it, because in that time it was normal and there was no information about these kind of things. And children and adults too struggle with identity. And these are when we are not comfortable in our skin, the drawbacks, like lacking of roots, or when your identity, when you're a chameleon and you sometimes say, okay, I'm always making other people happy, but what about me? These are the moments that you need to really sit down and look at the advantages of your culture identity and how you can make it fit in the place you are. Also with networking, so it's very important to become aware. We never talked about it. We all knew it, but we were not aware. Do I explain myself? We all knew about cultures, but we were not aware of the effects of culture and the way we were living. And it was great, but it was hard too. And the next question is, when I ask people, where do you come from? And we started with this question at the beginning. I'm wondering how many of you really rather than writing immediately something, really had to stand still for a second and say, okay, what does this question mean? And for TCKs, it is the worst, it's a very difficult question to ask. Where do you come from? And that is because we have a physical home. In my case, my physical home was where my parents were living. At least that's what I always said. So I always said Venezuela, because my parents were living there. In the moment they moved to the Netherlands, I got into trouble because my home wasn't Venezuela anymore, even though I had a Dutch house where I was growing up with my children and educating my children. It never felt like home. And then when my parents moved to the Netherlands, it was hard because Holland didn't feel like home. Other places felt like home. So we TCKs have a nightmare with this question. So I always start saying, hi, I'm Edmée Schalkx. I was born in Venezuela, but my parents are Dutch, because I know I look Dutch, and people are going to be puzzled terribly if I only say I come from Venezuela. And these are the things that make us uncomfortable. But if we are aware, we can take the power out of it. Because having a Mexican mother and a German father, they are two total different languages, cultures, norms, and values. And if you teach your children and teach yourself how to make it more compact and choose from both sides what's the best for you, you will surely give a faster form to your identity. I'm not sure if you follow me, and you may disagree with me. But this is my experience also with the clients I work with. So I wonder how many of you really struggle with this question, where do you come from? And how many of you really stand still for a split of a second, depending on who you have in front of you. If you are Mexican, if I'm as a Venezuelan, I see a Mexican, I don't doubt, I jump and say I'm Venezuela, with no doubt at all. When I'm talking to an American, I immediately say I'm Venezuelan, but my parents are Dutch. So you move, you change, you adapt. And I did it many years not knowing I was doing that. Now that I know about it, I can use it better. And that's what leadership is about, to know who you are, what your backgrounds are, what culture does to you, because culture not only matters, but culture impacts lives. And if you are aware of it, then you can use it in a much seamless way for people so that you as a leader can unite them and bring people together.
And Edmée, we have a couple of suggestions here. Whereas you have Christina who says, she answers, I was born in and I've lived abroad for a long time.
Yeah.
Other person who suggested, I'm Dutch but was born and educated abroad, and said that helps. But you have people who agree that it's a dreaded question. Because
it is. Yeah. You learn to find a solution out of it. But kids have problems. Kids are the ones that struggle the most about it. Because we're talking about, we came here to talk about the kind of leadership TCKs are. I want to start by reflecting that nowadays the world is shrinking, really. More people are becoming more global. Businesses, the resources, the way we network, individuals are becoming more globalized. The way we sell and we buy are often mixing culture and countries. So we are less and less able to discern that. There is a study that says that we have nowadays 70% more TCKs in the world than we had 15 years ago. So that means that the number of TCKs are growing, and they are going to have more and more impact on business and globalization. And if decision making and cultural norms are entangled with each other, business who want to be successful do really have to start to understand what's the difference between culture and countries. And just an example, how many of us wear jeans? I think a lot of us wear them. It's probably the most global piece of clothing existing at the moment. This gentleman, Levi Strauss, created jeans in 1854, and he started with creating tents out of canvases. And then people started asking him if he could create clothing that was strong enough for the mind so that the clothes were lasting long. And if we look at the history of a jeans, we can see that before we can wear them, they have gone a long way. Because usually the cotton of the blue jeans come out from Brazil, while the dye is Indian. Putting the jeans together, it happens usually or in Singapore, in Indonesia, or in Bangladesh, while the designers are Europeans and Americans, and the shipping yards are usually Chinese. So before we can wear our jeans, the jeans have already been all over the world. And to manage this whole chain of produce, you need to have a better understanding of the different countries and the cultures, because each country, or in this case, each company who is producing that one part of the jeans, is managed by their own cultures, their own norms, their own business goals. And they have to communicate with each other so that at the end we have the jeans we want to have. And here we thought that jeans were an American product. So what's the role of a TCK in such a process?
Edmée, please excuse me, but just to let you know, there are 10 minutes left.
Yes, I'm wrapping. I'm wrapping up.
I'm very sorry.
No, it's okay. So TCKs are incredible bridge builders. It's who we are. We are able to see the win-win relationship. We think global and we look local. TCKs also are good at changing and managing change. So that's one of the strongest suits TCKs have when they are leaders. It's change management. We are able to translate local and global situations, and we have a big eye on globalization. Globalization is for TCKs a very important issue, and you will see that in politics. You will see that TCKs that are international are very global oriented. Networking is just part of who we are, and therefore when you are doing a business like managing the blue jeans process, you need to be able to move from one place to the other one and be able to create win-win situations. And manners, we know manners. We've learned to look at manners just by observing and waiting for the host or the person who is receiving us to do something, and then we're able to copy them very fast. And TCKs have usually a very wide perspective of business, because as from school time, we have been dealing with international business and people from all over the world and diplomats. It becomes part of the way we manage our business, but also how we talk to people. This is just a very summary of what we just talked. I will send you, if you leave the message, you could get this summary. And Before we go into the questions, I want to invite you, if you want, to continue the conversation on a virtual calls I manage every 6 weeks, and the next one is on the 11th of July. So that is about the TCKs. I also put a small list of reading material on this link. You can find more things about TCKs. I want to now go back to Linda and use the next 5-6 minutes to answer the questions you have.
Okay, Edmée, you have a certain number of them and comments in the chat. Let me check. So we have our question about what advice can you give your children to help them deal with this when they're not? And if, I hope you will accept my kind of summary generalization of the question. How can we help children who are having difficulty with their third culture identity? I know that you have in the chat box someone too who of their 2 children is having a problem with one. We also have that some of the drawbacks. No, I mentioned that in the second study there was work done with the poem Where I'm From. I have a specific question. Where did you find the data about the increase of TCKs in the past decades?
Okay, let me answer the research story. I made, like I said just right now, I made a list of materials you can read there, but there is there's an organization, I forgot the name now, but if you write TCKs Global, you have an organization there that deals with TCKs. You can find all kinds of studies there. There is also an organization called Global Village, where you can find a lot of things. SIETAR themselves have also made some research. So there is a lot of research, and there are organizations like Unilever, 3M, what's the other one? Shell, who have done a lot of research. So you can go into the internet and find it, but you could also go to the website link I gave you, and you could find things there too. That's that part. Yeah. Let's go back to the children answer.
The question is to, which I believe relates back to that, is slides handout support, dealing with the question of loss of identity, rootlessness, and detachment. I think they kind of go together.
Yeah, they go together. Children are resilient more than adults. They learn to adapt. They make it all their own themselves. The problem from my own work with the people I work, the biggest problems children have is when they move often from one place to the other one, or when they are in a school where kids are moving in and out. They create a safety net around them where they don't want to commit too much to new relationships, because they are afraid that in the moment they have made a new friend, they will lose that friend and they have to start all over again. Children also struggle with those emotions. How do I explain that? 2 children are not grown enough to share that emotion, and that's part of the parents who have to bring that conversation. It is the parents who have to bring the conversation with children, explaining them that, you know, you will see the people, that networking is important. Teach children to network. There's a big study that the biggest users of Skype and this kind of platforms is done by TCKs and expats. So teach them that. That's going to help them understand that. They're too young but later on they will understand how important this networking is for their own personality, because they will be able at one point and reminisce on the stories they had when they were young, when they are in another country where nobody knows. That's what's going to make them strong. I also think it's important that you mention culture. We didn't talk about culture the way we're talking about nowadays. My parents talked about we were Dutch and the norms and Dutch values are important, but we never reflected what were the norms and values of the Venezuelans that were part or not part of ourselves, that clashed or not clashed. And we never talked about going back to the Netherlands and finding out that not all the norms and values my parents brought with them were the same, because when they came to Venezuela, they were in a post-war. When they came back, Holland didn't exist the way they knew. And these are the things that we need to keep the conversation open. The books I gave you are very good. They're on that list. Just go and have a look at them and teach your children to embrace cultural difference.
And we have maybe one last question, easy question. This one, what time is the virtual coffee on?
It's
July?
4 o'clock. Just go to the site, you can register there, you get all the information, but it's at the same time as now, 4 o'clock for Central European. I want to answer one more question very quickly, because Rika is asking, I'm interested to know how TCKs compressed their history on a CV. That can be very easy, but it can also be very difficult, because you need to look at the job position you are. But if you are able to mention all the strong points TCKs have, like adaptability, about moving fast, about change management, about looking at perspective, these are usually the things that companies are looking for. So if you are, what I usually do is, in a very short story, I said, because of the experience I've had in all these countries, these are my strong issues. And I mentioned them: language, change, perspective, and that's the way I do it. I don't think there's a recipe for that. Yeah?
Okay, I think I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Remember that the next webinar is on the 20th of September, and it is self-awareness, a skill that can be developed, with Shannon Murphy Robinson and Mary E. Casey. And we hope to have many of you among us then again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I hope to see you. And just send me an email with questions. I'm willing to answer them to any of you. Take care.